Declaration of Independence from Britain, inaugurating the 5-year Revolutionary War, which is celebrated every year with fireworks. Adjacent to Pennsylvania is the small state of Delaware, known as the first state because it was the first to ratify the U.S. Constitution after the war. During the war, the first American victory was achieved when General George Washington secretly crossed the Delaware River with his small army on Christmas night in 1776 to surprise and capture the Hessian troops in Trenton, New Jersey. We visited the crossing site with Meg's parents. We also visited the reconstructed wood cabins at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, where Washington's men suffered so much during the bitter winter of 1777 and 78. After Pennsylvania and Delaware, we moved on to Maryland and stopped at Fort McHenry, where during the later War of 1812 with England, Francis Scott Key was inspired to write the Star-Spangled Banner. You can see that it is still waving today. Then we came to the city of Washington, D.C., and after spending the night with some friends outside the city, we took a whole day touring our nation's capital, located in the District of Columbia, established as the seat of national government in 1790. We started with the Washington Monument, completed in 1888 and standing 555 feet tall in the middle of the mall. From its top, one can see, looking east, the Capitol building, where Congress meets to enact laws. Its dome was being renovated at the time of our visit, but we did get in to see both the House and the Senate chambers. Looking north from the monument, one sees the White House, the distinguished home of all our presidents, and open daily for walk-through visits by ordinary citizens like us. In 1959, President Dwight D. Eisenhower was nearing the end of his presidency, and though, of course, we did not see him in person, we were deeply impressed with his residency. Looking west from the top of the Washington Monument, we see the beautiful Lincoln Memorial bordering the Potomac River. To us, this was the most moving and meaningful of all, memorializing the Civil War president who was shot and killed in 1865. Above his statue are inscribed the words, "In this temple, as in the hearts of the people for whom he saved the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever." Finally, looking south, we find the strikingly architectured Jefferson Memorial on the edge of the tidal basin, honoring the country's third president, Thomas Jefferson, who had sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against any form of tyranny over the mind of man. From Washington, we crossed the Potomac to the state of Virginia, where we paid a visit to Jefferson's marvelous mountainside home at Monticello. We were fascinated by its unique structural layout and by his intriguing household inventions. His self-designed tombstone identifies him as the author of the Declaration of Independence, the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, and father of the University of Virginia. We also visited Mount Vernon, the elegant Virginia home of General George Washington, who became the country's first elected president. Then it was on to Williamsburg, a fine restoration of the colonial capital of Virginia. It was here that the seeds were planted for the American War of Independence, when Patrick Henry cried out, "Give me liberty or give me death." Historically, we need to remember, however, that he was then speaking of freedom only for the white colonists and not for the thousands of black slaves whom they owned at that time. Not far from Williamsburg is Yorktown, where the final battle of the Revolutionary War was fought. Back in our hometown of Wethersfield in Connecticut, we had previously visited the historic Webb House, where Washington and the French General Comte de Rochambeau had planned the campaign ending at Yorktown in 1781, which at last brought victory and independence from Britain for the Americans. When visiting the site of this concluding Revolutionary War battle in Yorktown, we imagined what it must have been like first to see the British flag flying, and then to see taking its place the flag of the fledgling United States of America. The nearby Moore House was where British General Cornwallis surrendered to Washington. Continuing down the east coast to North Carolina, we admired the monument at Kitty Hawk, which marks the site of the Wright brothers' first powered airplane flight in 1903. In South Carolina, we stopped at Charleston, at the site where the first shot of the fateful war between the states was fired when South Carolina seceded from the Union in 1860 and shelled the federal garrison on Fort Sumter in the harbor. We rushed through Georgia after seeing a waterspout in the distance which we were afraid might turn into a tornado. And then we were in Florida, where David in particular was eager to visit Cape Canaveral, the site of early rocket launchings. It was on July 29, 1959, that we visited Cape Canaveral, later to become Cape Kennedy. We could scarcely have imagined at that time that almost exactly 10 years later, on July 20, 1969, two human beings from America would actually set foot upon the moon and then return safely to Earth from outer space. Because there was so much to see and do in the Miami area, at the southern end of Florida, when we got there, we found a trailer camp which we could use as a base for several days, leaving our tent and little trailer there while we went on one-day excursions in the car. We saw what the fabled Miami Beach resort area looked like and found a public part of the beach where we could go swimming ourselves. In the Atlantic Ocean, which still had breakers, but those waters were somewhat warmer in this southerly clime. We drove out to one of the Florida Keys at the bottom tip of the state, Key Largo, a low, sand-covered island with coral reefs in the water and interesting shells on the sand and rocks next to the lighthouse. Then we made an all-day trip to the Everglades National Park, looking for exotic birds and occasional alligators, as we made our way along the wooden walkway through the marsh. Outside the park, there was an alligator farm where a lot of them were penned up. And a trainer showed us how he could grab an alligator's mouth without getting bitten and without, apparently, harming the gator. Animal slides seemed to offer a popular diversion, not just for this small alligator, but also for this colorful parrot at another exhibition attraction called Parrot Jungle. It was fun here to have all three of the children provide perches for these 5 parrots all at the same time. These pink flamingos were a pretty sight. But the most exciting and dramatic place we visited in Miami was the Miami Seaquarium, where for the very first time we saw live performing dolphins. None of us had ever seen so beautiful and graceful a creature. We were absolutely enthralled at its skill and obvious intelligence, whether leaping through a hoop, ringing a school bell, or playing basketball. The dolphin seemed to like the cheers and applause we gave it when it succeeded. We learned that these were bottlenose dolphins captured in ocean waters off the coast of Florida. There, this time he made it. Viewing the dolphins through an underwater window with a diver and some giant sea turtles, we could see how they used their flat horizontal tails to propel themselves through the water. Indeed, their tail strokes were powerful enough to send them leaping out of the water up into the air several times their own length. Dolphins like these have frequently been observed in the wild, leaping high above the ocean surface,